This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and ascend. The horse is the white of the eyes, and dark within. This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and ascend. The horse is the white of the eyes, and dark within. This is...
You liking the juice?
You liking the juice? You know, I mean, to say whether we like this juice or didn't like, this is the juice we've all been waiting for. And I feel like normally juice is a metaphor for the relative quality of a given thing we're watching. This week I feel like the juice is just the cum in my pants, because I just watched episode 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return.
So you did like it?
I did, yeah. And I mean, much like David Lynch, I normally don't like to talk about like the meaning behind the metaphors I use, but this time it's cum. No, that was awesome. But first we gotta talk about episode 7, where a guy sweeps the floor for 3 minutes.
I said it last week, but I think we stumbled upon the secret to watching Twin Peaks: The Return. Watch 2 episodes at a time. Because, nothing fucking happens in episode 7, and then too much happens in episode 8. So I guess let's go through 7 real quick.
I didn't have a problem with it. It flowed fine. I mean, the stuff that we did get as far as like Cooper getting out of jail and I mean, that was all fun. I liked the callback to Mr. Strawberry.
Yeah, I didn't think Mr. Strawberry was coming back. We did get...
We found out that the diary pages, or we found out what the things were. They were the diary of Laura Palmer.
Yeah, we find Laura Palmer's diary. We find out that Ruth Davenport's head was put on Major Briggs's body, but yet he's still a 40-year-old man who is reportedly died a few weeks ago, rather than Major Briggs, who would be 70 if he were still alive.
Which I took that to mean that, presumably, because I think he would have been in his late 40s 25 years ago, around the time of the original show.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, presumably, he at some point shortly after the season 2, he was sucked into the Black Lodge again or something, and only recently came out, and then was killed.
We saw his head in the episode 3. Is that related?
So wait, are we saying that's literally... Because I assumed that was like his spirit. Are we saying that's literally his head floating around in that place that Cooper was?
I'm saying, is it possible that Major Briggs stumbled upon the entrance to the Black Lodge, just stuck his head in a little bit, and then his body stayed in the real world?
Well, no, I mean, I'm assuming the other implication of that scene is... Because we see one of the... what are they called? The Woodsmen?
Yes, the Woodsmen. I just finished editing our first episode. I kept calling them Mountain Men, but no, they are called Woodsmen.
Yeah, well, we see one of the Woodsmen in the hospital when they're with his body, so I think the implication is that...
Okay. Yeah, I wrote that down. I wondered if you caught that. But yeah, there's just a Woodsman just hanging out in the fucking Twin Peaks sheriff's office. We also find out some stuff we do find out what happened to Audrey Horne through Doc Hayward's Skype conversation.
Well, okay, I know that from reading other stuff, but it didn't seem like... Because I guess she's in a coma, right?
Yes, at least after her accident at the end of season 2, she was put into a coma.
Because I don't know, I kind of tried to skip around the stuff I was watching so as not to be spoiled, but I know she comes back, but I don't think... my understanding is they don't really explain her story very well, but that seems to be like a story point, that for some reason Evil Coop was visiting Audrey Horne in the hospital. I assume they come back to that at some point?
It might be a pretty big important story point.
Because I feel like they wouldn't have mentioned that, because that's pretty much the only thing we found out about what Evil Cooper's been doing in between the season 2 and season 3, so I assume it's important.
Well, and he's apparently also been terrorizing Diane as well, because when Laura Dern sees Evil Coop, she basically flips her fucking lid.
Yeah, we mentioned that Diane was introduced in the last episode. We get a lot more with her. and just her foul mouth. I really like that character. I wish they would have figured out a way to do it with her not being on screen, just to continue that. But I mean, I like Laura Dern. So.
If it was just David Lynch holding a tape recorder the whole time.
Well, I feel like he could have gotten away with it, considering it's Twin Peaks and he's David Lynch. He could have done it almost like the Austin Powers joke, where it's like,
there's just
never seeing his dick,
strategic plants
covered up by things.
Strategic plants covering her face the whole show.
Yeah, or like the secretary in the Powerpuff Girls,
because through that Doc Hayward conversation in Skype, we find out kind of the epilogue to season 2 as well. Doc Hayward fills us in on what happened, where he basically kind of realized that Coop was kind of fucked up and not acting himself after he woke up from his trip to the Black Lodge.
Well, I think from what we get in this episode, which is, I gather, probably most of what we're going to get as far as that in-between time for Evil Coop, I mean, I think it's just like, well, no, he just left. Like, he's just a guy, and he had no, I mean, them not knowing that he's possessed by anything, they never would have questioned why he left.
Yeah.
Unless you happen to see him and see that he was acting weird, and even then you wouldn't have gone, well, he's clearly possessed by a demon. You would just like, no, he's just a weird guy. He was always a weird guy, and now he's just weird in a different way.
Well, it also kind of helps catch us up on kind of what happened in between season 2 and 3, because basically, Coop just fled Twin Peaks, and no one's ever seen him again. But yeah, we also get Laura's diary is what Hawk found in the women's restroom of the sheriff's station. He theorizes that it was Leland Palmer after they were questioning him for Jacques Renault's death, and I guess he hid them in there. What he was doing in the ladies' room, I don't know. I can't remember if they ever concretely say how the pages got in there, but it does seem weird that just the missing pages of Laura's diary were just shoved in the wall of a urinal.
Well, and not only weird, but because the theory, which I don't know if they go back to that and there's more to it, the idea that Leland Palmer took them out of the diary and hid them because they implicated him, but they don't. Well, it's not like the diary says, and my father's trying to kill me or something.
Well, you gotta think, according to the Twin Peaks Sheriff Station, Leland Palmer murdered his daughter. They don't have fucking files on Bob.
But it doesn't say anything about Leland Palmer. It just says, like, if they'd found her diary and read those pages, they wouldn't be any closer to finding out that Leland Palmer was the killer.
No, but it does kind of implicate someone, because the diary does say, like, I know it isn't Bob, I know who it is. Although we don't really know what that means, but because, I don't know. Was Laura Palmer ever under the impression, while she was alive, that her dad was possessed by a demon? I don't think so.
I think in Fire Walk With Me, she basically figures that out. Because at one point, I remember there was a scene where, like, she's sort of, possessed by Bob. Like, they see him in, like, the white face makeup.
Yeah.
So, like, I think by the end, she understands that there's something more going on.
All right. But the diary pages are also a link with Fire Walk With Me, speaking of Fire Walk With Me, because it is the dream that she had in Fire Walk With Me featuring Heather Graham, when she wakes up and Heather Graham's all bloody in her bed and says, the real Cooper's in the lodge, write it in your diary. I can't remember the exact quote, but so she actually did write it in her diary. Laura Palmer was good to her word and wrote that crazy dream down on paper.
And that's because I asked you immediately when they referenced that, because I know Annie's not in this show. They didn't bring Heather Graham back.
No.
Do you remember what the resolution to her character was? Did she stay in the Black Lodge or did she leave?
No. She was thrown out with Evil Coop. But
okay, because I guess.
Yeah, that's why. No, that's why he's asking how's Annie at the final scene.
But I couldn't remember, like, if they confirmed if she'd, like, died or anything, or if they, because I was kind of trying to think, like, was there, like, a deleted scene or something for that I couldn't remember?
No, I think they may mention that she's, like, resting in the hospital.
And then, because the thing is, like, again, going from the standpoint of the cops, had they hypothetically found these diary pages back in the day, not knowing that there's supernatural shenanigans going on with a demon named Bob, they see a reference to Dale Cooper, the investigator, in her diary. Imagine if they found that then. I think the implication that they would take from that would be, oh, Dale Cooper insinuated himself into this investigation because he's the killer.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, that also trips them up, too. They're
if
like,
I
because
was
Laura
the
Palmer
investigator,
never met Cooper.
Yeah, but that would be a connection that wouldn't make any sense to anyone not privy to the supernatural aspect and the fact that it's a dream vision from the future. So they would go, oh, the only other connection is that this freaky FBI agent came to this town to investigate Laura Palmer. Clearly, it must mean he's in on it.
Yeah. What else we get? We see Jerry walking around high in the woods. That was fun.
I like that. I mean, that's just the beginning of the episode, and the way this show is doling out its story arcs in piecemeal, without any kind of regard for I'm almost certain by the time that storyline comes back, I will have completely forgotten where it left off.
Yeah,
and that's going to be like every other storyline in this show.
There's a pretty good payoff to Jerry high in the woods, but yeah, I don't know when it comes back. Let's see. Andy questions a trucker. Was that the truck that killed the kid?
Yeah, that was the truck that killed the kid, and I'm assuming that guy is dead. What is the guy that drove the truck? Do we know even who he is, or other than he's a bad guy?
Not quite yet. We will, though.
Because he's the guy who ran over the kid, and I'm assuming he probably murdered the witness as well.
Spoiler.
Well, because there's just a slow push into that door. I took from that he's dead in that house.
Right. We don't know as of now, but what we do know is Twin Peaks: The Return has 2 SNL alums, because we also get fucking David Koechner in this bitch. I forgot he showed up.
Yeah.
I think he's in another scene,
too. That was a surprise for me as well. And once more, I'm still enjoying Dougie, even though apparently I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, we didn't get a lot of Dougie in either of these episodes. But he does beat off, I don't know if we mentioned it, Ike the Spike is the dwarf assassin's name that was introduced in the last episode. I think he's only billed that in the credits. But Ike the Spike finally confronts Dougie Coop, comes up to him. I guess Coop's FBI instincts kick in, and he tackles Ike the Spike, wrestles his gun away, and then what was the thing at the very end? Did he grab his hand so hard that part of his skin fell off?
I wasn't sure. Well, because of course we also get the man from another place, or the man from another place as a tree. And what did he say? Something about... Didn't he say, rip his hand off? His hand off?
Yeah, he said squeeze his hand off.
Yeah, so I think that's sort of the idea, is that he squeezed it so tight that, flesh actually came off of it.
Yeah, because the cops take Ike the Spike's gun and just peel a piece of skin off of it. What else we got? We get Ben Horn and Ashley Judd looking for a hum, and then we get a scene with Ashley Judd's husband, which... I can't remember if that ever comes back.
Well, I don't, as far as that scene with the husband, I don't know if that was meant to mean anything or signify anything specific. I mean, can I throw out my theory as to what the hum is?
Sure.
Because they focus on, it's in the wood, and you don't know where it's coming from specifically, oh, it's over here, no, it's over there. And then they push into the humming of the wood. I feel like that's got to be the spirit of Josie Packard that we know lives in the wood of the Great Northern, right?
That's what I think, too. And honestly, after episode 8, between episode 8 and the final episode, I really don't remember this show. So I don't know if they ever find out what the hum is. But I remember when I first saw this episode, I had that same thought. I was like, they're focusing on the wood. Josie's face is going to pop out of there. But then I remember that David Lynch wasn't part of the show when that happened, so for all I know, David Lynch has no idea that Joan Chen turned into a piece of wood, into a doorknob.
Well, no, apparently, supposedly, that was David Lynch's idea. He just wasn't around to incorporate it. So whether or not they incorporated that idea correctly,, who knows? But yeah, the idea that would be how she ended up.
Right. But also in this scene, Ben Horn does get the room key that was mailed. So Coop's old room key is now in Ben Horn's hand. That's probably going to lead Coop back to Twin Peaks, maybe. I don't remember if there's any significance of the room key, but Ben Horn's got it now.
It's funny how much I rely on you for, like, is that going to come back? Is that going to... And you fucking know. Even though you've seen this entire show, you basically know as little as I do.
Pretty much. Yeah, there's a big, like, gap in my knowledge between episode 8 and the finale. I remember the finale because I watched it, like, twice. But yeah, this is kind of when I started, like, not checking out of the show, but, like, really just kind of, like, watching it and then kind of forgetting about it. I stopped becoming obsessed. Like the first couple episodes, I was going online after each episode. What are the clues? What did I miss? What are the hidden Easter eggs for Twin Peaks? And then it was around this point where I was just like, I'll watch it when I get around to it. Like, I lost kind of my enthusiasm for the show.
Well, and this is probably a good sort of segue into my descent into madness. And yours as well. You joined me.
A Space Cadet?
Yes. But, well, because, like, we've been talking about, like, how should we be watching this show? How should we be regarding the mystery and the clues and the surrealist elements? And how much credit do we want to give to David Lynch as the storyteller and the sort of magician behind it? And like, as far as, like, is this symbolic of something else? Or is it just a whatever? And I feel like over the course of watching the Twin Perfect video, where his thing is it's all symbolism, and he has to think of what the symbolism means. And then Space Cadet has a different idea of what the symbolism means, but they're both basically on the symbolic track. And I think after watching 7 full hours of one guy analyzing another guy's analysis of Twin Peaks, I've decided I'm rejecting all claims to symbolism, and I'm just treating all of this as... much as I would watch, like when I watched Lost, for example, and got into the mythology of that and tried to figure out what it all meant, I never thought of it symbolically. I thought of it just as like, oh, well, the others are going to turn out to be, maybe they're the Dharma Initiative, maybe they're not. Oh, but what's Jacob? Is he the smoke monster? Or are they, like, I'm watching it like that, where it's all just, it's in the context of the universe of Twin Peaks, and that's all it is, and I don't need to know what it signifies beyond that.
Yeah, there's a couple things in this show that are definitely symbolic of something else, but I don't think everything is. And that's when I watched that analysis video. He does a good job of like proving, backing up his theory. But he's pulling clips from like the original series and pulling clips from this series, and see, they tie in. But I don't think David Lynch was laying down clues in the pilot episode of Twin Peaks to lead to this. Like, this wasn't part of his plan. Or was it? Because why would, like, when we get to episode 8, the convenience store is brought back. Why was that scene in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me?
Well,
the David Bowie scene.
See, and because that's where I would kind of differ from you, is like, I don't think he had to have necessarily planned it out that strictly. I mean, again, going back to Lost, they didn't have a plan, but they reverse engineered one. I think around the time of season 4, they kind of thought, okay, what are all these mysteries that we threw out and didn't have an answer for? Let's answer them all and connect them all. And, I mean, your mileage may vary as to whether or not you think they succeeded, but I think that's kind of what David Lynch is doing with The Return as well. I feel like you had the initial seasons 1 and 2, and, he threw out a lot of ideas, and maybe he had some ideas as to how they would connect, and then Fire Walk With Me was his first stab at, like, okay, here's my idea of what the mythology of Twin Peaks is. And a lot of it was centered around that scene in the convenience store and, Garmin Bozia and all that stuff. And then the Return is sort of like, I get another bite at the apple. I get to, like, I feel like he had some version of the sequence in episode 8 in his head the whole time. Whether he ever thought he would get to enact it. Like, this, I feel like this, on some level, was always the backstory. Maybe he just didn't necessarily know how he was going to articulate it.
Yeah, maybe. Because before The Return, when Twin Peaks ended with Fire Walk With Me, that David Bowie scene it doesn't seem like really related to anything. I mean, it is because Bob's in there too, but like you don't know what the fuck's going on. But now with the return, that scene almost is like a setup for this series. Like you need, if you didn't watch Fire Walk with Me, the David Bowie scene is kind of like the prologue to Twin Peaks: The Return.
And that gets me to another thing I wanted to talk about too, because we talk about surrealism a lot, and I always think of that term in terms of it's sort of like a pejorative way, like you label something surrealist, and so you can dismiss it and say like we don't have to worry about understanding it because it's not meant to make sense. It's just crazy imagery. And there's a criticism of David Lynch, specifically centered around Twin Peaks, but his work in general, that he's attempting to sort of be beyond criticism through his surrealist approach. That he can always say like, "Oh, I meant to do that." So like, if you criticize anything about his storytelling or anything, it's surrealism. It's meant to be impenetrable. And so like, I'm watching that convenience store scene in episode 8, and I'm remembering David Bowie said in Fire Walk with Me that the thing happened above the convenience store. The convenience store only has one level. Was that an intentional, like, supernatural thing? Like, the second level where they live is, like, in another dimension? Or is that a continuity error? They only found a convenience store with one level. Am I adding that because he couldn't be bothered to find a 2-story building?
Right, so why don't you make a 2-hour video backing up your clues?
Well, because, like, I watch Doctor Who, and that's a thing they do in Doctor Who all the time. Like, that was a twist in one episode. Like, a building only had one story, but everybody saw 2 stories, because the second story was actually an alien ship that was sort of cloaked, and it had a perception filter around it to make it look like part of the building. So it's like, it could be something like that, like, the whether that's the Black Lodge or some other facet of that, like, it's in another realm.
Who knows? There could be a little attic up there. But yeah, the only other thing that really happens in episode 7 is Evil Coop does get out of prison. He confronts the warden. We do get a return of Mr. Strawberry. I did not think that was coming back. We still don't know what it is. It's not my theory that it was Bob molesting the warden when he was a kid. It looks like the warden's just into some fucking seedy shit with a Derek McCluskey and a Mr. Strawberry.
Well, that
Evil
was my
Coop
suggestion.
somehow knows about this.
Yeah, my suggestion was that it was just something he did that Coop found out about so that he would have leverage in this moment. Because I guess... I don't know. Well, is the implication then that all of this, the last few episodes of him being in jail, he got caught on purpose for some reason?
I don't think so. Because remember, the only reason he's in jail is because he threw up all that cream corn in his car.
See, I don't know. I kind of took this to mean... But I don't know what that reason could possibly be at this point, because it didn't seem like he accomplished anything. Or maybe it was like talking to Diane for the first time. Maybe that was something. But like, I don't... like, it felt like why would he already have this in his back pocket with this particular warden at this particular prison so that he could get out unless he planned to be there in the first place?
Oh, maybe. Or maybe just Bob's a supernatural being who has ways of knowing this shit. Also, he's involved in the criminal underworld, so maybe he knew that already.
I suppose. And I'm trying to remember, because we get the guy that, I'm just calling him the mob guy. He was, I guess, the boss of the bad guy that ran over the kid. And was he in the first episode as well? Was he one of the criminals that Bob was working with from the beginning? Or did we just find out about their connection in this episode?
I think this is the first time we've seen them together.
Yeah, I can't remember. Because again, we haven't really got a lot of details as to what the criminal enterprise is or was, or whether that's ever even going to matter.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, Bob and Ray. Hey, Bob and Ray. They're on the run now. And I guess the only other thing we need to talk about in episode 7 is this.
Well, the most symbolic. I mean, I said I'm going to reject symbolism, but I feel like this is the most symbolic sequence of the series. I assume this is what you're going to talk about.
So yeah, what the hell does this scene mean? What's the symbolism behind watching a guy sweep the fucking peanuts off the floor of a bar for 5 minutes?
Well, if I were to, and I'm not doing this as a joke, if I were to seriously consider what this might mean metaphorically, I feel like this is David Lynch, once again, I think a lot of this show is him not making fun of his audience in a cynical way, but kind of poking fun at his anticipated reaction to this show. I feel like he kind of knew going into this that people were going to feel a little listless by this point, and the idea of making his audience watch 3 minutes of a guy sweeping up a floor is his joke. Like, this is what he's been doing for the last 7 episodes. The fact that this comes right before episode 8, which he also anticipates everybody is going to blow everybody's mind, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think this is like, yeah, this is what you've been through, and you don't even know what's coming next, but, you know, this is what you think the show is. Wait until you get to the next episode.
Yeah, well, and it does, like, set you up to adjust your patience level. Because in episode 8, that is a long episode. That one felt long to me. I mean, it was good, but like there's like no dialogue hardly at all. It's very slow moving. But it's, you know, you're just watching it going like, what the fuck am I watching? But he teases that in episode 7 by making you watch a guy sweep the floor. And it's exactly what it is. You're just watching a guy sweep the floor.
And that, and I don't know if you want to just get to episode 8 at this point, because the pacing kind of surprised me, because I'd always heard episode 8 was the big mythology episode. It was like just a long sequence of like finding out about the secret supernatural history of Twin Peaks, and we do get that, and it's very interesting and riveting, and there's a lot to talk about. But yeah, I was surprised at how slow moving it was ultimately.
Yeah, my notes for episode 7 and 8 fit on one page. Like, there's very few scenes. In episode 8, there's only maybe like 12 or 14 scenes in this whole hour-long show.
Because I'd heard a lot of people talk about the sweeping scene in episode 8, and like episode 8 there's a little bit of prologue where Coop and Ray are driving, and Ray shoots Coop, and there's a very interesting sequence where the woodsmen revive him by rubbing blood on his face. But once we get into the flashback sequence, it starts with this incredibly long pan through the atom bomb, through the mushroom cloud, and through what it seemed like the atoms splitting and this sort of cosmic ballet, very sort of 2001: A Space Odyssey. But as it was going on, I was just like people complained about the sweeping? How the fuck long is this gonna go where it's just a bunch of fucking smoke?
Yeah, there's like, you can't see anything. It's just like weird like flashes and things coming at your face because we're going inside the nuclear bomb. And then, so I'm a little confused. Is the convenience store inside the nuclear blast?
No, I don't think so. I think the implication is the nuclear blast, and again, this is my just dumb Lost style, just deducing the mythology from the show and not thinking about it symbolically. I think that the nuclear blast, I mean, it's a representative of all the great evil that man can do to the world, but I think it like cut a fissure through reality, and then the Black Lodge bled into our world for the first time, and that's, you know, that entity, which I assume is the same entity that was in the box in the first episode, spit out a bunch of monsters, one of which was Bob. I'm guessing some of those other egg creatures are maybe some of the woodsmen. But then, because the next scene you see that they come from smoke, and they appear in front of the convenience store. I think the convenience store was just there in New Mexico, and it was just sort of, it was like the closest thing to all of that evil coming into our world for the first time, and that's why it became the locus for, you know, where they live, because it was like their first building. They just sort of made it theirs. They claimed it.
Well, because the way it goes in, we go. I'll explain it to the listener real quick. Well, first, yeah, Coop gets shot by Ray. Some woodsmen revive him. They pull a Bob orb out of Coop. And then we cut to the 9 Inch Nails performing for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, the 9 Inch Nails. They're credited with the in parentheses, because I believe the actual band is just 9 Inch Nails. My understanding of that is this is Twin Peaks world where 9 Inch Nails is still a band, but it's the 9 Inch Nails. It's a different band.
Right. So yeah, they just perform. Maybe they did it that way because they didn't want to end this episode with a musical guest, so they put it at the front, I guess. I don't know. But then after that performance, Coop wakes up, and then we just cut to black, and now all of a sudden we're in 1945. Nuclear bomb goes off. We go through the bomb. We see all the insides of the blast. And then we cut to the convenience store where it's all the woodsmen, like, dancing around. And then we go back to the blast. So that's why I was thinking maybe this is just the center of the nuclear explosion.
Well, no, because I think the reason we go back...
Like, here's where we hit the nucleus.
Well, because the reason we go back to the blast is because... what I took from that was that fissure of reality. We go through that into... that world that is representative of the collective unconscious where the giant lives.
Yeah, and well then we got to get to that because so we go to the convenience store, we see all the woodsmen dancing around, it's all like strobe lighty, and then we cut to the weird ghost thing we saw in the first episode that killed those two lovers. It's floating in black, it spits out some gunk, and then there's also a fucking Bob orb. So my interpretation of this is quite simple. It's just the nuclear blast is the heart of all the evil, and that creature is just spitting out more evil.
Yeah, and Bob is just the product of that. That made me think, though, because we always talk about Mike and Bob, and Bob was always referenced as Mike's familiar. And I've always assumed Mike was like just an entity from the one of the lodges, the Black Lodge, and then he saw the face of God. Which, are we meant to assume that is the giant at this point? The giant is the god of light. That Mike saw. Like,
I don't know. Well, here, let's set it up quick before we talk about it. So after this weird monster spits out Bob, we then go into like a fancy little lounge where this woman is just sitting listening to music. She's billed in the credits as Senorita Dido. And then the giant walks in. He's hearing some like bells ringing. So he goes and watches a TV. Well, it's like a big screen. It's like a movie screen. He's in like a theater. And he's watching what we just watched. He's watching the nuclear explosion. He floats up and he barfs up a ball with Laura Palmer's face in it. Senorita Dido kisses it, sends it in a tube, and the tube shoots the ball back to Earth. Now that the audience has kind of got a picture of what happens, what the fuck is going on?
Well, all I can take from this is that Laura Palmer, on a larger spiritual level, was created by the giant as a counterpoint to Bob. Because it's not just that he sees the evil, he literally sees the orb with Bob's face in it, and he kind of looks with alarm, and that's when he creates the Laura Palmer orb, it's another orb. It's sort of you have this evil, dark, black orb, and this good gold orb. So I think the idea is like, this is what's been sent there to fight Bob. To fight his evil.
Yeah, so basically the giant is creating Laura Palmer to send to Earth to counteract Bob, which was spit out by that evil monster.
Yes, that these were two, like the giant and the evil creature are two sides of some kind of epic battle between good and evil, and their representatives, their sort of chess piece proxies, acting in the world are Bob and Laura Palmer.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like the simplest explanation for it. But there's probably something else, right? He's not going to give away the secrets of the universe in episode 8, is he? Why is the giant looking at a screen? It's almost as if he's watching the show.
Well, and again, that's when we can get into the thing we both watched with Twin Perfect and Space Cadet. The theory that Twin Perfect espouses is that they are all living in a world where they know that they're TV characters and that there's a meta-textual element, and Space Cadet tries to claim credit for that, like he also had that theory, but I feel like if you actually watch his stuff, he didn't.
Well, no, he was the guy I was talking about. We talked about it in like the first episode, where I was talking about, I watched a video where some guy was like, I watched season 1 forward and the return backwards, and they synced up. And then I checked out that guy's video. That was the guy where he was like, yeah, if you watch the original series forward and the return backwards, you'll notice these similarities. And I was like, no, you will, because you're stoned watching 2 Twin Peaks in reverse.
Well, but and you didn't even get that far, because you watched the first 2 parts of his, Space Cadet, this guy, spent 7 hours watching all 4.5 hours of the Twin Perfect video, and I spent 7.5 hours watching his video, watching their video. You only watched the first 2 parts, so you don't get to the third part where I realize the secret of why he sounds like such a fucking whack job. Apparently, the Space Cadet guy believes in, like, some kind of... and I think this kind of goes into, like, maybe the David Lynch transcendental meditation thing as well. Like that there are deeper sort of spiritual connections with coincidences where, like, he believes that his actual, like, life experience through the collective unconscious is somehow influencing the show. Like, when he references, like, other movies that it's clear David Lynch didn't watch, or he references his own life experience as if it seemed like, it sounds like he's suggesting David Lynch somehow knew about his own life and incorporated that into the show. Like, he literally means that because he believes that on some level it's all spiritually connected, and David Lynch is through transcendental meditation is tapping into something. And so, like, yeah, he didn't actually watch Moon Junction necessarily, which he keeps bringing up as a reference, but he knew about it on a spiritual level. Like, that's ultimately Space Cadet's theory. It's that dumb.
It's a good theory.
I mean, it requires that actual supernatural shit exists in the world that makes our TV shows work the way they do. Whereas, whatever you want to say about Twin Perfect's theory, I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but it just takes stuff from the show. It doesn't assume that, like, we have psychic resonance that is influencing Twin Peaks and David Lynch across time. But anyway.
Yeah, you can't win a debate by going, well, I'm right because God told me I was. Oh, okay, well, if God said you were right, I guess you got the right answers.
But, I mean, so much of that video, the 7-hour one, is just him going, I came up with this first. I hope he's going to give me credit for this at the end. And is he going to get to the quantum physics part of it? And it's like, no, he's not, because that's just some fucking dumb shit you came up with.
Yeah, and I like how he bitches about, like, well, this guy's gone viral. He's got, like, 300,000 views. My video's got, like, 100 views. But that's okay. Like, I don't think it's okay. I don't think you're okay with it.
That was what really keyed me into that guy's videos, was just how the sadness of his life. I don't know if you went through his channel. It just seems like Twin Peaks ruined that guy's life, and that's fascinating to me.
All right, but yeah, because there's more indications that the Twin Perfect theory is valid, that some of these characters know they're in a show, or they're maybe on 2 different planes of existence, possibly. But yeah, the giant watching, and he's in a movie theater, so he's watching all of this play out on a screen, and he's so far away, like, before we get to the giant and Senorita Dido's house, or wherever the hell they are, we pan through, like, an ocean for a super long time. It's a super slow pull-in shot to this building, and then we even go through the window, too, and then we finally get to Senorita Dido, and she's just sitting there for a while, and then the giant walks in and looks at her, and it's like 15 minutes of just, like, not a lot going on. It's almost like David Lynch is saying, these people are not connected in any way to what's going on. Like, we have to go way far out of our way to even get to this place.
Well, and I don't know if you got that far into the Twin Perfect side of it. One thing I think he is absolutely right about in terms of and I don't even think it's symbolism, I think it's just a reference. And going back to sort of David Lynch's belief in transcendental meditation, the place that the giant lives in is, and I mentioned it, the collective unconscious. That's straight from transcendental meditation. David Lynch has, and he shows these videos of David Lynch depicting his idea of the mind, the internal mind, as a vast ocean from which the ideas spring. He compares it to fishing. You're fishing for ideas. so I think the idea that the giant lives there means that he's the closest thing to a creative god in this universe. And the idea that he lives in a movie theater is because that's how David Lynch kind of views filmmaking, is sort of like creating dreams by pulling ideas from his unconscious. So this is sort of like a version of that as part of the mythology of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, and the show actually does kind of bring that up. So I don't want to talk too much about it because there's an episode later on down the line where we can really get into that discussion.
Well, I think we've always had that when it came down to the Red Room. The red curtains were always very sort of theatrical. It feels like the wings. Before I even saw the Twin Peaks or the Twin Perfect video, I always kind of had that sense. I never really put it together as far as the full meta idea, but the idea that was at least a metaphor or representation of filmmaking in some sense, that was always clear to me.
All right, so yeah, after Senorita Dido kisses that Laura Palmer ball and sends it in a tube to Earth, we then go to 11 years later, where this weird locust-looking thing with frog legs hatches out of an egg.
And I know that I happen to know something about this, not from either of those videos, by the way, but just from reading other stuff. I don't know if you know this. And it's not canon. It's from the Mark Frost book, specifically the most recent one that came out to correspond with The Return. There's a girl in this where the end result of that creature, that it crawls in this little girl's mouth, supposedly that girl is a young Sarah Palmer.
I don't know if they come right out and say it, but they definitely infer it.
Well, not in this episode necessarily. I know that from other stuff, but you mean later on in the series they do?
Yes, later on in the series, it's pretty obvious that this little girl is Sarah Palmer, Laura Palmer's mom.
Yeah, because that kind of blows it wide open for me as far as. Well, okay, here. Well, can I just throw out my? Well, I don't know. If you want to, do we want to go into more of this before I go into my theory as to what that is?
Oh yeah, well, because let's talk about the fuck. Well, you want to talk about the locust? Because what happens with the locust is, and then we can talk about the woodsman after. I guess they are related. They're doing the woodsman chants to put everyone to sleep, but this weird locust thing ends up crawling in a girl's mouth, and then that's the end of the episode. The credits roll on this little girl sleeping with whatever the fuck this thing that hatched out of that egg is just now inside of her. And yeah, spoiler alert, that little girl is Sarah Palmer. And we'll get more into that in later episodes. But yeah, what's your theory on this locust then?
Yeah, well, like I said, I didn't know that they actually confirmed that in the show. I thought that was just from the Mark Frost book, which I haven't read, but I'd read that. I'd seen that in other videos. But I think that's the crux of it as far as like the evil plan, because I'm connecting a lot of stuff. The idea that the woodsman obviously and the evil Lincoln guy, they're working for the evil creature. They were spit out from that evil creature, and Garmonbozia is pain and sorrow, and it's sort of like it feeds the evil. I think that the whole goal was to possess something, to create something inside Sarah Palmer. I think Sarah Palmer is the great evil. Like the idea is the pain and sorrow of what happened to Laura Palmer. It wasn't about Laura Palmer. It was about Sarah Palmer. It was about feeding a beast inside her, which is that whatever that thing is that crawled inside her. It needed food. It needed to make Sarah Palmer's life miserable through horrible circumstance after horrible circumstance, culminating in the death of her daughter and her husband, and her own culpability in that, to ultimately give birth to what I'm assuming is this same creature, the same evil that's in the box that's puking the stuff out. I think that's also in Sarah Palmer, and it's that creature was the infant form of it that needed to grow through Garmonbozia.
Right, and then remember in the last episode of the original series,
she talks with a weird fucking voice. That's what I'm going by as well.
Yeah, she walks in and she's like, "Agent Cooper is in the lodge."
That's what I'm going by, is I think she was possessed by something, which at the time I just took from like she was maybe something from there was speaking through her voice, but now I think something's been inside her all this time, and that was the end goal. You know, we're focusing on Laura Palmer. It was actually Sarah Palmer that we should have been focusing on the whole time.
All right, so why did the giant send Laura Palmer to Earth? So, wait. So the locust crawls in young Sarah Palmer's mouth. She's only 11 years old, or she might be older. It's just 11 years after the blast. And then the giant sends down Laura Palmer. I guess time is irrelevant because it can go in any time, but he sends the Laura Palmer orb, I guess, so she'll give birth to Laura Palmer?
Well, I think Laura Palmer represents this force for good that was ultimately an attempt to stop this plan, but ultimately it didn't work. But the idea is that this was it was a fight for Sarah Palmer's soul, Laura Palmer being the good side of that, and Bob being the bad side of it.
Right. But yeah, another theory, which I think the Twin Perfect guy brings up, but is that the giant and Senorita Dido are kind of like us watching the show. They kind of represent the audience, or like just people outside of the imaginary world of Twin Peaks. But then when evil is created, he creates Laura Palmer to counteract that balance, and that's basically like the creation of the show.
Well, yeah,
something like that.
His idea, such as I understood it, was that it was all about like saving television. So like the idea that Laura Palmer's the death and the investigation was meant to be like prior to that, murders were very sort of like inconsequential, and he talks about consumable violence. Like, you never got into the life of the victim. They were just disposable victims. The idea is Laura Palmer, we would investigate her, not just her death, but also her life, and see her as a real person. And so, we wouldn't view murder as flippantly as we would in previous television shows. And so the idea is that aim also became the mythology of the show, where she's literally like a supernatural entity meant to save us from Bob, who represents our dark impulses to want disposable victims.
Right, and the nuclear bomb is the perfect metaphor for that, because we created something that could destroy us all.
And the idea is that the fact that the woodsmen immediately go to media is another thing. It's the idea of television rots your brains. The radio is a symbol of that.
Yeah, because then what happens, the last thing we didn't talk about is, all these woodsmen show up, and one just sees a radio station. He's kind of compelled towards it. He walks in, he squeezes a woman's head off, runs into the control booth, or the whatever the fuck you call it, grabs the microphone as he's squeezing the head of the DJ, and recites a poem over and over again. This is the water, this is the well, drink full and ascend. The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within. And I've probably unleashed a ghost or something by saying that.
Well, and this is where, and again, I keep bringing up the Twin Perfect because I kind of like a lot of his ideas, but here's where I feel like he gets into the weeds a lot. Like, he talks about the fact that I called him a Lincoln because he's actually a Lincoln impersonator, the actor that plays that guy.
Oh, really?
And earlier in the episode, Sarah Palmer picks up a penny with Lincoln's face on it and rubs it. And, is there a connection there? He thinks it's because the idea of, electricity, and copper is a conductor of electricity, so the idea is that's sort of a metaphor for that. But then the idea of, the horse is the white of the eye and the dark within is sort of his answer for what the white horse means, ultimately.
It's got to mean something.
Well, his explanation is that the horse represents, symbolically, the evil that we create when we look away from evil. So the white of our eye when we look the other way. Like, every time the horse appears, it's not just when evil's happening, but somebody's looking the other way.
That's something I always wanted to do on a Twin Peaks rewatch, is write down the traffic lights and stuff. Were those more than just exterior shots or just transition shots? I always wondered if those symbolize something. When they cut to the traffic lights, what's happening in this scene? Or when they cut to the white horse, what's happening? It's got to symbolize something. He's not just going to throw in a horse there just because he rented a horse that weekend.
Well, I mean, the traffic light thing, that's an interesting one because in between watching this episode and the last one, I saw a clip, because YouTube is now recommending Twin Peaks shit to me just constantly because of all the stuff I've watched so far. And I saw the clip from The Simpsons when Homer watched Twin Peaks. And it cuts to the giant dancing with the horse with the traffic light hanging from a tree. And I'd forgotten that the traffic light was such a symbol that people would actually, like, you know, import meaning to it. I always just remembered that, if anything, as just a transition. You know, the idea that would be anything seems weird to me.
Yeah, which it absolutely could have been.
But the horse obviously had to mean something.
Right, but yeah, we're looking for symbols and things that may not have symbols. Is there a reason why this guy's sweeping the floor? Maybe he's just sweeping the floor because it's fucking closing time and he's got to get the peanuts off the ground. You know, we don't look like if you were watching Roma, you wouldn't be like, wait a minute, Alfonso Cuarón, he's telling us in this scene, like, no, maybe he's just telling a fucking story.
Well, and that's when we ultimately get down to it. Whether you want to say it's pointless to find meaning in it because it's so overly complicated, like, because when you get to, like, the two videos, the Twin Perfect guy and the Space Cadet guy, both of their theories ultimately amount to what I would consider an oversimplification. It has to be. Space Cadet is like, it's all Audrey Horne is in a coma and she's dreaming this, and all the characters are different versions of her psyche. That's his ultimate thing. And Twin Perfect, of course, they're all in TV, and they know their TV characters and that thing. And there's complicated offshoots of that, but I feel like the idea that if you could bog it down to either of those ideas, then it wouldn't be as interesting as it is. I feel like it can't be either of them because they're too simple. I compare it to Lost is just they're in purgatory. It ultimately turned out to be much more complicated than that, with a bunch of different avenues and different facets to it. And I feel like Twin Peaks has to be the same way. I think there is a deep mythology to it. There's a bunch of stuff to it. It's not something that you're just going to be like, oh, it's all a meta TV show commentary, or it's all whatever, or dream.
Yeah. No, I think, both of those guys, you know, it's very easy to say, okay, I've figured it out. I know what it is. And here I've pulled 100 examples that prove my point. But that makes, you know, if that's the case, then that means that David Lynch in 1990 was like, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to start dropping some hints. That did not happen. And what the Twin Perfect guy does that, like, doesn't piss me off, but, like, makes me go, like, okay, that's a little weak, is when he's pulling scenes from, like, the pilot and going, see? So when Cooper says this, that's actually David Lynch saying, we don't need to do this. You know, he's reading into just random lines. And it's like, no, that wasn't it. That was just Cooper talking to Sheriff Truman.
Well, like, right away, he talks about, like, one of the first things he brings up is, like, what do flashing lights symbolize? Because, you know, whenever you're in the Red Room, lights will flash on your eyes. And then in Fire Walk With Me, it happens. He's like, oh, no, that signifies the light that will reflect on your face when you're watching television. So it's another clue. And then it also represents, you know, investigation. At one point, he cuts to the clip we saw in an earlier episode where the guy's flashlight didn't work, so it was flashing. But then and the first time we see this, it's in the scene where they're investigating the body. But it's like we know from a practical standpoint that was just invented on the day. That light was literally going out, and he liked how it looked, so he did it. It wasn't, you know, symbolic of anything at the time. It was just, oh, that's a cool image, let's incorporate it. The same with Bob. You know, the way Bob was depicted was because, you know, Frank Silva locked himself in a room and he thought it looked interesting and he got caught in a mirror. You know, so the idea that, like, that was planned out from... No, it would be too simplistic to say he's making it up as he goes along, but he is making a lot more of the connections, I think, after the fact than before the fact.
All right. I guess Mark Frost wrote this series too, but I'm wondering how much do you think they really treated the original series as like their show Bible, or if they were like, this is its own thing, we can do kind of whatever we want.
Oh, so okay, I don't know how much you credit Mark Frost with The Return. It feels so David Lynchy to me, and I know Mark Frost was involved in the writing of it. Apparently he went away to write the book, though, at some point, and David Lynch kept writing. So I feel like... I don't know, to the extent that it connects to the original series, it's the stuff that David Lynch was involved in. It's season 1 and season 2 up to the death of Leland Palmer and the finale. I think you have to just ignore all the post season 2 stuff. That's another thing that where like Space Cadet gets mad because it's like he's not even including any of the Annie stuff, and it's like, yeah, and he's right not to include any of that because it doesn't mean anything. But
why is the Pine Weasel not coming back in the return?
But I'm trying to think. Who was the character? He was like an actor, and he was like a love interest for the secretary lady.
Dick Tremaine.
Dick Tremaine. Was he in any of the? Was he only in like the second half of season 2, or was he in?
I think he's introduced in season 2.
But I'm trying to remember if he was introduced after David Lynch left or not.
Oh, probably.
Because like I'm trying to think, like just all the elements of that show post Leland Palmer's reveal. Obviously, the big thing being a new villain in what is his name?
Wyndham Earl.
Wyndham Earl. And just how, like, it feels like really bad fan fiction version of Twin Peaks. But I'm, like, thinking of, like, all the elements that were introduced in that, and how none of them were brought back, seem to have been brought back in the return. Like, I can't imagine Wyndham Earl's coming back at all in this season.
I don't think so. He may have, like, a cameo or something. I can't remember. But, yeah, I don't think so. No, David Lynch doesn't give a shit about that. But what does he give a shit about? Do you think he gives a shit about the show? About the original Twin Peaks?
I think so. I think, at least in terms of the mythology that he had a hand in building, in terms of, what Bob is and what the Black and White Lodge and all that stuff is, I think, I think he likes the characters more than he likes that stuff. So I think to the extent that he's giving us more of the mythology than he is the characters at this point, I feel like that's all a setup for maybe a twist, Like, remember when Lost ended, and people didn't like the resolution, and they went, well, it wasn't about that, it was about the characters, and it always sounded like it was full of shit, like, no, you couldn't pull it off, and so you said it was about the characters. I'm almost anticipating that this is actually going to end that way for real, like, we're going to get all this stuff, like, we're going to get episode 8 and all the stuff that springs from it, and at the end it's going to be like, yeah, but you shouldn't have been caring about that, you should have been caring about Dougie and that stuff. That's what I'm anticipating anyway.
Yeah, you're not too far off.
Because I feel like that's what he likes minutia. He likes small town, little stories like that. I think if I understand David Lynch, Dougie Jones seems like this would be his favorite thing in this show.
Yeah, probably.
So
that's all I got. Yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about? But yeah, episode 8 is fucking crazy. But I remember when we were watching this, Ben says, I think we were watching the sweeping the floor scene, and he goes, "Oh, well, this is only set up for episode 8 where we're going to get all the answers." And I was like, "Oh no, we're not going to get fucking answers."
Well, no, that's the thing, it basically poses more questions, but I do feel like even had I not been prepared for this at all, like I'd heard stuff about this episode and seen I've been a little bit spoiled by it or from it, but even if none of that had been true, I feel like I would have definitely gotten a strong sense that I understand the parameters of the mythology, the idea of like the players and the stakes, the cosmic good and evil battle. All of that stuff feels very clear to me here. The fact, you see that played out, independent of what else you think about what's going on. Even if I didn't know that was a young Sarah Palmer, like that, I feel like, that character is clearly important. And what I'm thinking of as far as like, there's an evil insider that's growing from an egg into it, all of that stuff I would have gotten anyway.
Yeah. Is it possible that this is just a really straightforward story and people are looking too much into it? Because it could just be what we just said. Nuclear blast started a fucking chain reaction of evil, and somewhere there was a giant and a Senorita Dido who was like, "Oh shit, we gotta stop this. Let's throw our Laura Palmer orb." Like, maybe it's just that. That's all it is. Well, it's not a metaphor for television or the Illuminati. It's just a giant saw a nuclear blast and was like, fuck, that planet needs a Laura Palmer ball. I'm gonna barf one up real quick.
Well, again, going back to Lost, you have all these mysteries, and everybody, as they're analyzing the show, are looking for the central thing that ties everything together. But by the end, it's actually a complicated story about these two brothers, and one of them turns into a smoke monster, and the various events lead to a pirate ship crashing, and then the Dharma Initiative comes. Like, it's all like a bunch of different things that are just, wrapped up into the narrative, and I feel like this is kind of the same way. It's like this is the giant and the little man from another place and the creature and Bob, they're all just functions of how this universe works, and this is just how David Lynch is telling the story.
Yeah. So this is almost like the season premiere of Twin Peaks. This is how it all started. Nuclear blast, because this is the farthest we've ever gone back in time, I think. Yeah, I don't think we've ever had any flashbacks other than the movie Fire Walk with Me.
No, and this is, this feels like that one scene in Fire Walk with Me. This feels like that as an entire episode. And, I mean, I'm all for it, obviously.
Yeah. This is where I think, if memory serves me correctly, the show was, not on for 3 weeks. So I watched this episode, and then I was like, oh, shit, I have to wait 3 weeks for an episode? And then by the time episode 9 rolled around, I'm like, fucking Dougie's still here? Because that's the thing. We just watched 2 episodes where we got very little Dougie. I just saw episode 8. I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck's going on? And episode 9 probably starts with Dougie going, duh.
But at the same time, even with Dougie, we're still getting little bits of, in episode 7, where the little man from another place pops up, and he seems to recall, a piece of himself, at least in that moment. So, we're getting... stuff with that I feel like even if you don't care about just Dougie being Dougie, you're getting some mythology there as well.
Yeah, he slowly wakes up. He's basically slowly waking up. We do get some hints of Coop. He loves the officers' badges. He's fascinated by badges. And then when he wrestles the gun away from Mike the Spike, that's like, Dougie wouldn't do that.
Which, yeah,
somehow Coop is in there somewhere.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that, and of course, like I said, I'm liking Dougie anyway, even without that stuff.
He keeps things light.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, Dougie wouldn't have worked in episode 8. You need that to just be heavy and dark, and then next time we can... And of course, we're going to watch 2 episodes, 9 and 10. I feel like nothing's going to live up to this episode.
This is this was the episode I remembered the most, after I watched it.
Yeah, so I mean, we're almost at the halfway mark. By next week, we'll be exactly at the halfway mark.
Yeah.
So I think from there, I feel like we're on a good pace. I do think watching these 2 at a time is working, and I'm curious to see how that goes. You mentioned the Space Cadet thing of putting it backwards and forwards and seeing connections. I feel like that's kind of what we're doing, but just in a simplistic way. We're just watching them 2 at a time and realizing that it works better that way.
Yeah, it's just weird that episode 4 is better than episode 3. So if you watch them back to back, it's like a fun 2-hour movie. Episode 8 is better than episode 7. You watch them back to back, and you're like, oh shit, yeah, that was fun. But yeah, watching it week to week, I was like, oh fuck, I watched episode 7, and I'm like, what the fuck happened, man? Nothing fucking happened. I mean, a lot of stuff happened, but nothing huge, happens in episode 7.
I wonder how many people watched that scene of a guy sweeping up shit on the floor for 3 minutes and went, that's it, I'm done. I'm giving up. I'm not coming back to the show. There's no way that episode 8 is gonna... I mean, what is it gonna be? Is it gonna be more sweeping? I'm not even gonna give it the chance.
Alright, well, on that note, I guess join us next week for more sweeping the floor.
No, I mean, again, I am very much enjoying this experience. I feel like this was definitely worthwhile.
Oh yeah, no, I'm liking rewatching it. Alright, so yeah, that's all I got. Hold on, let me do a quick pass of my notes to make sure we didn't miss anything. Who gives a fuck?
There is a lot in that episode. I was surprised that they didn't kill the guy that was with young Sarah Palmer. I feel like I was waiting for him to walk by one of the woodsmen and just get killed.
No, the one thing we did when the woodsman crushes some heads in the radio station. I think that answers my question of, did evil Coop squeezed that poor guy's face to death or not. I think he did. I'm almost assured that guy's face was squeezed to death, because we see it in full force in this episode.
Let me ask you this then, because I took that the first time, because you see him do it to two people. First, like, the secretary, and then the guy. And the guy, he clearly, like, crushes his head, and, like, it takes him a long time. When it happened to the girl, I kind of took it to mean like he was doing something, like, mystical, like he was rotting her brain from the inside.
That's what it seemed like, because it looked like just blood was dripping out of her head. But, yeah, I guess he was just squeezing her brains out, and we were just seeing the front of it. But then, in the second time, we see the back of it, so we actually see his fingers, like, dip into the skull.
Because that's another Twin Perfect thing. He thinks the ultimate message of Twin Peaks can be boiled down in bad TV rots your brain. And so that's like a literal manifestation of that.
I dig it. We gotta stop talking about those two assholes.
Which is my entire frame of reference for the show is now colored by their stupid fucking feud. And yeah, it means nothing, but it's just I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah, no, neither of them are right. They just have theories. I have theories, too. I just don't make YouTube videos. I do podcasts.
Well, I think...
Where I don't have theories. They could be. Well, no, I mean, nothing's spelled out, but, yeah, I mean, that Twin Perfect guy has a good theory of what it all means, but like I said, I don't think David Lynch was planning that out from the beginning. There is definitely a possibility that he had that in his mind when making The Return, because, yeah, there is a future episode where it kind of gets into, who the fuck is basically telling this story, Are we all living inside somebody's head?
I mean, even if you just want to say that, like, he didn't necessarily have it at the start of the show, but by the time Fire Walk With Me was being made, that's when he kind of was making those connections, and because the main thing he cites, like the first thing he cites is all those characters in that room talking about their nature, and like I forget how he says, like, chrome shows our image or something, like all these things that he kind of equates it to television. That's all from the movie, so it's possible, like, that's where that all comes from, ultimately.
Yeah. Or that might just be the freshest thing in David Lynch's head. That's the last thing he wrote Twin Peaks related, so he went back to that.
Yeah.
You know what theory I have not seen yet? And it just kind of occurred to me a little bit ago. Most people will tell you Fire Walk With Me is like David Lynch's commentary on movies versus TV. Basically because the movie starts with an axe going through a television. I haven't seen anybody talk about the relationship between this series being on pay cable. Like, if there's a commentary where, like, Fire Walk With Me was the movie, the original Twin Peaks was the broadcast television, this is the cable one. How do they all connect in that way?
Well, I think you can definitely see a thread of, like, a commentary on what TV is like now versus then, with how just darker and gorier it is. I think if it is a commentary on TV, it is a commentary on how TV has gotten darker. And the Twin Perfect brings that up a little bit with a sequence that we haven't gotten to yet, but so I tried to skip around it so as not to be spoiled, but apparently something with Big Ed and Norma is that he thinks is a metaphor for his relationship with Showtime.
Oh, I don't know what that could entail.
But I'll have to go back and
well,
I'll wait when we get to that. Maybe I'll go back and watch it and see what it means. But
yeah, I guess we'll get to that when we get to that. So, anything else before we get off this?
Well, I was just gonna say my only theory is that we haven't gotten much as to where Coop has been in between the original show and the new show. My theory is he changed his name, moved to Las Vegas, and had really awkward sex with Elizabeth Berkley in a pool. I think those universes are clearly connected.
That's a good theory, but when does he go back in time to Bedrock and become Fred Flintstone's boss?
Well, that wasn't him. That was his character from The Hidden, which, remember, David Lynch watched and then made Audrey Horne watch before she went to sleep and dreamed Twin Peaks, which is literally Space Cadet's theory. That's why Kyle MacLachlan plays Dale Cooper, is because Audrey Horne saw The Hidden, where he plays an FBI agent, dreamed him into Twin Peaks. He sucks.
Okay,
he
yeah, that
fucking
doesn't
sucks.
make any sense. That doesn't make any sense, but we'll get into Audrey Horne when we get into there. He might have something there. But anyway, that's spoilers for or future episodes. Until we see you again,
Get
off the shed.